We're in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the date is Sunday, September 21st. And your name is?
Norman Kogen.
And do you want to tell us a little about your history coming to Arizona?
Okay, I came here in 1954. So I've been here 54 years. My parents came here in 1947. And my dad began to negotiate to buy the Central Avenue dairy. The old folks had died, and now the estate had the property. And as my dad relates the story to me, he said that when he got up to the lawyer's office, the family got into a fist fight up there. And he says, well, this has got nothing to do with me, so he never did purchase the Central Avenue dairy. The Central Avenue dairy subsequently was sold to Al Burstock from New York and Ralph Burbacher, and then they began to develop it and subsequently developed Park Central. But my dad then purchased the property at 24th Street in Camelback. And it was the largest purchase at that time for that area. And he paid the exorbitant price of $2,500 an acre. So we had 10 acres there for $25,000. And that was a big deal. It made the headlines in the Arizona Republic. I came here, as I said before, in 1954. My dad, prior to that, had built the Arizona Manor, which was a resort hotel at 24th Street in Camelback, which is where the Northern Trust is right now. When I came here, they were just starting to develop the property for housing on 24th Street between like Indian School to Camelback. And the housing was just being erected at that time. One of the significant parts of the resort hotel was that most of the establishments in Arizona or in the Phoenix area were restricted. If your name was Cohn or Goldstein or Greenberg, you didn't get in. So this was kind of a pioneering event. And I used to say, it reminded me of the immigrants when they passed the Statue of Liberty. Give me your poor, tired, your homeless, your Jewish people yearning to be free. And finally, the Jewish people began to come into Arizona. And I would say at that time, we probably had the majority of the trade. But it wasn't exclusive. Because of the fact that there was a nightclub at the corner of 24th Street and Camelback. It was called the Cocoa Club. Now, the original Cocoa Club was built, I think, around 1949, and it burned down in the early 50s. And it was rebuilt, it was rebuilt as a cabaret. And the cabaret was sort of financed by the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. And they began to bring in the Hollywood entertainment. So I became host to people like Sammy Davis Jr., Jerry Lewis, Jeff Chandler, who was from New York, and his real name was Ira. Because I remember standing in the hotel one day, and he was on the telephone, and he says, "Hi, this is Ira." And I always thought of him as Cochise. And
were all these people staying at your dad's hotel?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we had a lot of notable people. Eleanor Roosevelt stayed there. At that time, Senator Jackson stayed there. We had a lot of very prominent people that stayed there.
So what happened to the hotel?
What happened to the hotel? We sold the hotel in 1962. And the first thing that went was the stables. And that became the First National Bank of Arizona, which is now changed the name one more time until now it became Wells Fargo. And that's where the horses were. The hotel itself is now the Northern Trust building.
And what can you tell us about your involvement with Volunteers for Israel?
Volunteers for Israel, okay. I got involved, I had been to Israel one or two times, and then I somehow became aware of the Volunteer for Israel program, which they call Sarel. Sarel is from the Hebrew word sarut, which means to serve. That's where Sar is to serve, and El would be the acronym of Israel, Sarel. And that was kind of interesting. So I used to recruit people to go to Israel to go ahead and work on that program. The thing that was kind of amusing there, some of the Israelis would say, "How much are they paying you to come here?" And I'd say, "No, we come here as volunteers, you know, to help out and so forth." And I remember they would look at each other and they'd roll their eyes and they'd say, "You're crazy." But it was an interesting experience. Most people that go to Israel, that tour to Israel, many of them, they go to the Rome or to where they've got some other hotels there now, the Hilton and the Sheraton and so forth, and they never really get to see Israel when you go in because they steer you into everything that's good. Israel has a lot of schmutz, and when you go to on this program, then you begin to become aware of it, because then you are at a cross-section of the people that live in Israel. It's not all good. There's some things there that aren't so good. But they had a program which was very interesting, a program called Home Hospitality. So they would ask you, like on Wednesday, what are your plans for the weekend? In Israel, Shabbat, everything shuts down, including the military bases. Everybody goes home for their leave or whatever. But what they would do, if you wanted to go to Jerusalem or if you wanted to go to Tel Aviv or wherever it is that you would have a desire to go to, they would make arrangements either in a 3-star hotel or a hostel. You know, for a couple of bucks a night, you could go ahead and you'd spend your weekend there into a hostel. But this program with Home Hospitality is you could stay with an Israeli family. And that was very enlightening, to stay with a family. And I did that about 3 or 4 times. I stayed with a family one time that migrated from Holland. And then I stayed one time with a family on the Golan. And they would take you to different places in the area, and they kind of show you things off the beaten path that you wouldn't find otherwise.
We want to thank you for coming in and sharing your story. And
well, I'm not finished yet.
well, I'm sure there's plenty more, but this will go to the archives of the Arizona Jewish Historical Society, and I know for generations to come, they'll enjoy your story.
Okay. Very good.
So, thank you.